Good news about my Joni. Yes, make plans to go. He always makes me feel safe at night when we pray together. For years, Joni Lamb kept her cards close to her chest and never told the whole story about the rumors, bad press, and stress that were going around her name. Everything changed just now, though. She said the one thing that no one thought she would say, and now everyone on the internet can't stop talking about it. Was it an admission, a warning, or a last goodbye? That thing that lit up the screen and ripped open the truth behind a story we'd only barely touched on before now. It began like any other show. The theme song played, the lights came on, and Joni Lamb sat in her usual chair with her calm face. People watched because they were looking for comfort, encouragement, and Dyer's normal positive message, which he had been giving for years. But it was clear right away that this wasn't going to be a normal show. It felt like something was off. Her voice was steady, but it had a weight to it that it didn't normally have. She said it with a tight smile and tired eyes. How she said it was more important than what she said. It was so faint that it seemed like it came out of nowhere. At first, a lot of people thought it was just a weird line, like a metaphor or something taken out of context, but it wasn't. Joni had meant what she said. She looked straight into the camera with an odd sense of calm and said something that caught everyone off guard. The internet went crazy in a matter of seconds. Video clips of the event were shared all over social media. People from everywhere had something to say. Not only were people surprised, they were shocked. To clear things up, church groups sent messages to each other. The leaders of the Bible study stopped in the middle to play the clip. Pastors, Sunday morning, they were asked about it. No matter what people thought Joni's words meant, they made me feel something deep down. She had been a sign of stability for many years. It felt like things were no longer stable. It got worse when there was silence after the show. There was neither an official explanation nor a follow-up episode to show what had happened. There was only a clip that was shown over and over, and rumors that got stronger every day. Some people thought she was telling the truth. Some people thought it was a call for help. Some people thought she was blaming someone close to her. But this was something that everyone agreed on. After that night, things would never be the same again. Things began to change quickly behind the scenes. The staff allegedly got tense. There were reports of meetings for emergencies. Someone from the group was seen leaving early. Some volunteers who had worked with Dyer for many years began to pull back. It looked like a storm had been lying in wait just off the coast. The first lightning strike was broken by this report. The supporters began to split up. Some people stood up for Joni and said she was finally being honest and revealing the truth. Some people felt betrayed, like someone or something holy had been hurt without notice. A lot of the work that ministries had done with Dyer over the years stopped. Guest talks were canceled. Donors started to ask tough questions. Joni didn't say anything the whole time. The silence itself sent a message. A hole that people filled with guesses, questions, and deep sadness. People who had watched her for years felt like they could no longer trust her. And that trust started to break down faster as time went on without an answer. Many people now say they could feel it coming. There was a different vibe on set. Joni's presence was getting farther away and less personal. It was said that Rachel Lamb would take over as boss and that money was being used in strange ways. But this moment, this show, tore the curtain right open. It wasn't long before the anger grew. Former workers began to speak out without giving their names. Some people said that something wasn't right for a long time, and that the culture behind the scenes didn't fit how it looked on screen. Others talked about how people who questioned choices were quietly fired and told not to ask questions. In the middle of it all, there was that one broadcast. It seemed like a small event at the time, but it would be recognized as the spark that set everything off. The moment Joni Lamb broke the picture that had been built up for years, whether she meant to or not. Some saw it as the start of the truth finally coming out. For some, it was an unbearable insult that they could never get over. It was a changing point though, no matter what. At that point, the ministry that many people had grown up with began to feel like something else. For many, it was the end of an era. Not with a bang, but with a quiet storm that came out of nowhere after just a few carefully spoken words. Behind the scenes, something very different was going on while the cameras kept rolling and Joni Lamb kept smiling for the crowd. People didn't see the whole story when they saw the calm, polished picture on the screen. In fact, people who were close to the Daystar ministry could feel the cracks long before the rest of the public did. There is a very different picture that starts to emerge as you talk to more staff, volunteers, and even past guests. It took place over time. It began slowly, a change in mood in the way choices were made. Everything changed when Marcus Lamb died. Of course, people were ready for sadness. They thought things would be not easy. What they didn't expect, though, was for it to get really cold at Dyer. What once felt like a close-knit family turned into a business where some people were no longer accepted. A lot of the employees who had been there for years said the atmosphere was tense and unsure. No one was sure who they could trust anymore. Open talks used to happen in meetings, but now they're more like controlled one-way briefings. Some longtime workers were quietly let go. No big news or thanks for years of work. They were just gone. Then there were whispers, late-night phone calls, quiet hallway chats, and deleted text lines. Patterns began to show up for people. Joni's daughter Rachel Lamb Brown was no longer just a helpful family member. She quickly took over. She had a lot of power over the shows, the staff, and even who could and couldn't talk on camera. Some people said she was strong. Some people said she was being used, but it didn't change what happened. It didn't feel good when the mood changed. Someone else said it best. It used to feel like going to church. It feels like branding now. There were reports that Joni no longer listened to advice and only hung out with people who agreed with her. Anyone who disagreed with her, or even just asked for more information, was either ignored or thrown out. Even the daily worship and prayer times that used to bring the team together became awkward. What they said was heard. They were worried about who would do it again. No one took their place when people started leaving. Sometimes there wasn't even a message. People would only notice that well-known names were missing and wonder what was going on. Another thing that caused trouble was money. People were still giving big amounts of money, but find out where all that money went. There were rumors about fancy trips, expensive clothes, and private parties that had nothing to do with ministry. Some workers were brave enough to tell management what they thought, but instead of getting answers, they were fired. There were also more and more worries about how Joni looked in public. People outside the building saw a strong, calm woman spreading hope, but people inside saw something different. A boss who is stressed. A mom who wants to keep her kids safe. A widow who might be trying to keep what little power she still had left over after Joni got married again to Doug Weiss. It made things even stranger. Doug himself caused a lot of trouble, with people questioning his past and his goals. All of a sudden he was showing up to staff meetings, giving his opinion, and being in ads. Some said he was helpful. Some said he was getting in the way. But once more, no one could question it, at least not in public. As the stress level rose, bonds began to break down. People who used to work together for years stopped talking to each other. Some people left quietly, while others were pushed. Joni didn't say a word during the whole thing. There were no comments or clear explanations, only carefully crafted social media posts, with verses and smiles. Former employees began to talk without giving their names. Some sent texts, and others talked to reporters. Their stories weren't crazy plots. They were simple facts that made the picture clear. At Dayar, things were not right, and it became clearer as more people talked that something was seriously wrong, not just with the leadership but with the spirit as well. As one former director put it, we weren't doing ministry anymore, we were protecting an image, and that image was getting harder and harder to keep together. The fact that Joni didn't say anything about Marcus's last months made things even worse. Some people who had been loyal for decades began to look elsewhere. They felt seen and heard in other organizations, voices and places. Behind the scenes, things got very tense when Joni's now famous podcast talk came out. Dayar wasn't ready for anything. The news took everyone off guard. Some people in the building agreed with her, but others were very angry. There were meetings, people left, and others cried alone. Then there was the fallout. People started to unsubscribe. The guest pastors pulled out of their plans. People who were giving stopped. There was still a network, but it didn't feel like the same thing. What used to be alive, united and based on faith, was now dull, split, and tense with secrets. The saddest thing is that most of the people who left weren't mad. They broke up because they were hurt. They was loyal, gave their time and worked hard. In return they felt lied to. Behind the scenes, Dayar was no longer a shining example of faith. People were scared, there were fights for power, and there was quiet pain. That shadow behind the camera kept getting longer no matter how bright the lights were in the studio. The real story began when the camera stopped rolling and the lights went down in the Daystar studio. Something very bad was going on behind the smooth shows. Joni's well-rehearsed lines, and her famous smile. There was an air of calm chaos building. There were rumors going around in the halls, tense meetings, and a clear sense that something big was about to break. It began slowly. People who had worked for Dayar for years started to notice the change. Things changed in the world. When people used to work together in meetings, it felt cold now. No longer did people share their ideas freely. People were afraid to say the wrong thing, so they carefully watched what they said. Joni had always been a strong boss, but after Marcus died, she kept a tighter grip on the ministry, to make you feel better. It felt like being in charge, not being led. Then there was the talk. There wasn't a big network show or a live stream church of that kind of podcast, which was short and easy, would have been ignored by most people, but Joni showed up. There was no PR team, no fancy graphics, and no big news. It was just her and a few mics. At first it seemed like any other she talked about religion, loss, and how to keep going even when things get tough. People sat down because they thought this would be another one of Joni's calming talks. Things changed around the middle though. She changed the way she spoke and stood up straight, and then she said something that stopped everyone in their tracks. Her voice was low and steady as she said, there were people around Marcus who weren't looking out for him. It was like the hosts had no idea what to say. There was complete silence in the room, and that's when Joni broke the silence. The story had been neat and clean for years. Marcus passed away suddenly from problems from COVID, and Joni kept going with grace and strength. That's what people thought. They were told that. Now though, Joni was teasing about something worse and more painful. Marcus might not have died all of a sudden, but maybe the people who were closest to him hadn't kept him safe. Right away, people started to analyze what she said. Do you think she meant had she brought up Rachel, or did she mean Doug Weiss, the man she married soon after Marcus died? No one knew, and Joni didn't say more. She didn't say anything, just let the words hang there. You could have thrown a lit match into a room full of. The world of Christian media went crazy. Lots of comments came in. People who used to be fans came back just to see that one part. Chapels that had supported Dyer for years, and then stopped talking about it, and those who had been loyal began to doubt everything. Why did Joni hide this? What else did she hide? After just 2 days, the podcast recording was taken down without a fuss. There was no notice or explanation. The hosts never talked about it. Joni didn't talk about it again. It didn't matter anymore. There were already many copies of the video clip on the internet. It couldn't be pushed back. That could have been the point. Joni may have wanted to say it now, while she still could. She still had some power in Dyer. But things went badly right away. The staff was told not to say anything. There were talks for emergencies. There were people who quit. Some people stayed but didn't say anything. Rachel stopped being in as many videos. People noticed she didn't look as sure of herself when she did show up. Her eyes were tense and hesitant in a way they hadn't been before. Even Doug Weiss stopped being there for a while. He was once in Joni's shows and social media posts, but now he seemed to be gone. There were no answers given, but people did ask questions. Was there already trouble in the marriage? Was he being looked out for? Or did he play a part in Joni finally breaking down? The talk was powerful not only because of what was said, but also because of how it was said. Joni didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't act like a weak person. She spoke like she was done acting. That might have scared people the most, because if she was saying the truth now, it meant she had lied before. There were more stories coming out. Emails from unknown people and former workers speaking out. People are watching and reinterpreting old Dyer broadcast video. Little things started to stand out to people. Times when Marcus looked like he was having a bad time. Everything was looked at again when Joni avoided answering some questions, or when Rachel seemed like she was practicing too much. Joni Lamb was right in the middle of it all. It used to be a sign of power and stability, but now it's a place where people are confused and suspicious. What she said opened a door that couldn't be closed again. The ministries backed off. Guest talks were canceled. People left the room. For those who stayed, it wasn't out of trust. They were interested in what they were. Dyer wasn't the only one who was shaken by the interview that broke the mask. Something much bigger was shown. A ministry that was built on image is now having trouble keeping it up. Also Joni, she had lit the match, whether she meant to or not. The damage keeps happening. The questions keep coming up. Things are even worse now that Joni hasn't said anything since the interview. That's because trust doesn't break very loudly. It slowly falls apart. As I write this, the sound of that fall can be heard in churches, living rooms and hearts all over the world. Dyer used to feel like he was living. The passion, the energy and the group. Everything used to feel real. The music, the stories, and the words from Joni and Marcus Lamb were not just live recordings. They made me feel like I was part of something bigger and more important. But now, something is missing. It's as if something holy has been slowly drained out of the ministry, leaving behind a smooth shell and a growing sense of nothingness. It took time to happen. The change was slow and quiet. People first started to notice the small changes. A guest speaker that people loved no longer showed up. A well-liked part was quietly taken out. Joni's words became different. Not as much heart, but more writing. People were still smiling.
Even though the set was still bright, there was something strange about it. People who had been watching for years knew there was a change, but they couldn't explain it. After that, there was quiet, the event that made everything shake. Everyone was shocked by what Joni Lamb said on the radio. It wasn't loud, but it was very clear what it meant. She gave hints of betrayal. She talked about people who weren't watching out for Marcus. It wasn't clear, it was careful, but it was enough. Enough to shock everyone in the Daystar crowd. Enough to wake people up and think about what was going on. After that, nothing. No follow-up. Not a single answer, not a single statement to explain, just silence. Joni posted the same